What if I told you that one of the greatest empires in history began with a small tribe living in tents on the frontier of the Islamic world? What if I told you that a man with no palace, no vast army, and no kingdom to inherit would lay the foundations of an empire that lasted for more than 600 years? This is the story of Osman Bey. The man whose name would become synonymous with power, conquest, and one of history's most influential empires. The Ottoman Empire. But who was Osman Bey? How did a tribal leader on the borders of Anatolia become the founder of a world empire? And what made his vision survive for centuries after his death? Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because today we are traveling back more than 700 years to uncover the extraordinary story of the man who changed history. A world in chaos. The 13th century was a dark and dangerous time. The Islamic world was under immense pressure. In the east, the Mongols were advancing like a storm. Cities that had stood for centuries were destroyed. Libraries burned. Kingdoms collapsed. The once mighty Abbasid Caliphate was in decline, and fear spread across the Muslim world. Meanwhile, in the west, the Crusader states still posed a threat. And in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, power was fragmented. Small states, tribes, and kingdoms fought for survival. This was not an age of peace. It was an age of uncertainty. An age in which only the strong could survive. Among the many Turkic tribes wandering across Anatolia was one relatively small tribe called the Kei tribe. Its leader was a respected warrior named Ertugrul Bey. Ertugrul had spent years fighting enemies on the frontiers of the Islamic world. For his loyalty and military skill, he received lands from the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. But these lands were not safe. They were frontier territories bordering the Byzantine Empire. Danger was everywhere. Raids were frequent. War was part of daily life. It was in this harsh environment, around the year 1258, that a child named Osman was born. No one could have imagined that this young boy would one day give his name to an empire. No one knew that generations later, millions of people would live under a state called the Ottoman Empire. At the time, he was simply Osman, the son of Ertugrul. The young Osman. Osman did not grow up in luxury. There were no marble palaces. No royal tutors. No armies waiting to obey his commands. Instead, he grew up among horsemen and warriors. He spent his childhood in tents. He learned to ride horses almost as soon as he could walk. He learned archery. He learned swordsmanship. And most importantly, he learned discipline. Life on the frontier shaped him. Every day carried uncertainty. Every journey involved risk. Every family understood sacrifice. These hardships developed qualities that would define Osman for the rest of his life. He became courageous, patient, and remarkably calm under pressure. As he grew older, people began to notice something different about him. He listened more than he spoke. He observed everything around him. And despite his young age, he earned the respect of older warriors. But Osman was not interested merely in surviving. He dreamed of something greater. Something beyond his tribe. Beyond the frontier. Beyond the endless cycle of war. He dreamed of building something lasting. Something that could unite people. At the time, however, such dreams seemed impossible. The world around him was collapsing. The Seljuk Sultanate was weakening. The Mongols were becoming increasingly powerful. The Byzantines still controlled important territories. And countless tribes competed for land and influence. Yet history often favors those who can see opportunities where others see only chaos. And Osman possessed that rare ability. He saw possibility. He saw a future that no one else could yet imagine. The dream. One of the most famous stories about Osman concerns a remarkable dream. According to Ottoman tradition, Osman once stayed at the house of a respected scholar and spiritual leader named Sheikh Bali. Out of respect, Osman stayed awake through the night because a copy of the Quran hung on the wall. Eventually, he fell asleep. And then he had a dream. He saw a moon emerge from the chest of Sheikh Bali and enter his own chest. Then a giant tree began to grow from his body. It became larger and larger. Its branches spread across mountains and rivers. Its shadow covered vast lands. Under the tree, people lived peacefully. Cities flourished. Civilizations prospered. When Osman told Sheikh Bali about the dream, the scholar interpreted it as a sign. He said that God had destined Osman and his descendants to establish a great state. Whether the story happened exactly this way or not, it became one of the most powerful symbols in Ottoman history. Because in many ways, that dream came true. From a small frontier tribe emerged an empire that ruled parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa. But none of that existed yet. At this point in the story, Osman remained only a young tribal leader with an uncertain future. He still had enemies. He still lacked resources. And he still had much to prove. Yet the foundations of greatness were already taking shape. The boy from the frontier was preparing for the journey that would change history forever. As the years passed, Osman was no longer simply the son of Ertugrul. He had become one of the most respected warriors of the Kei tribe. The world around him remained unstable. The Seljuk Sultanate was growing weaker. The Mongols continued to dominate much of the region. And the Byzantine Empire, though greatly diminished from its former glory, still controlled many fortresses and cities in western Anatolia. The frontier was a dangerous place. Every village could become a battlefield. Every journey could turn into an ambush. Yet to Osman, the frontier was not merely a place of danger. It was a land of opportunity. He understood something that many others did not. Empires become weak. Kingdoms collapse. Borders change. And in moments of chaos, new powers are born. Osman carefully observed everything around him. He studied his enemies. He learned the geography of the region. He listened to merchants. He spoke with scholars. He gained the trust of warriors. More importantly, he learned how to lead people. Unlike many rulers, Osman was approachable. He ate with his men. He rode alongside them. He shared their hardships. This created a powerful bond between him and his followers. People did not simply obey Osman. They believed in him. Soon, warriors from other tribes began joining him. Some were seeking wealth. Others sought adventure. Many hoped to fight on the frontier and gain new lands. Gradually, Osman's following grew. But his greatest strength was not the size of his forces. It was his vision. He knew that victory required patience. Instead of rushing into major wars, Osman focused on small successes. He launched raids against enemy positions. He protected villages under his control. He strengthened alliances. With each success, his reputation spread further across Anatolia. People began talking about the young frontier leader. Some admired him. Others feared him. Even Byzantine commanders started paying attention. At first, they considered him insignificant. After all, he was merely the leader of a small tribe. But history has often shown that great changes begin in unexpected places. And Osman was preparing for something much larger. Then came one of the most important moments in his life. The death of his father. Ertugrul Bey had led the Kei tribe for many years. He had protected his people through times of enormous uncertainty. Now his time had come to an end. For Osman, this was not only a personal loss. It was a tremendous responsibility. He was now expected to lead. To protect his people. To make difficult decisions. To guide the tribe into an uncertain future. Many leaders inherit wealth. Many inherit kingdoms. Osman inherited something different. He inherited a frontier. A dangerous borderland surrounded by enemies. Yet he accepted this challenge without hesitation. He became the new leader of the Kei tribe. And almost immediately, he began making decisions that would change history. Osman understood that his tribe could not survive by remaining isolated. It needed to expand. It needed resources. It needed security. And for that, it needed territory. The Byzantine frontier offered exactly that. Scattered across western Anatolia were numerous fortresses. These strongholds controlled trade routes and important lands. Whoever controlled them controlled the region. Osman began focusing his attention on these strategic targets. But he did not rely solely on military strength. He was also a skilled diplomat. He knew when to fight. And he knew when to negotiate. Some local leaders became his allies. Others willingly accepted his protection. This combination of military action and diplomacy proved highly effective. Osman's influence continued to grow. Soon, more and more warriors arrived to join him. The frontier had found a new leader. A leader who inspired confidence. A leader who seemed destined for greatness. One of Osman's most famous qualities was his sense of justice. Stories about him spread rapidly. People said he listened carefully to disputes. They said he treated both rich and poor fairly. They said he respected scholars and religious leaders. Whether every story is true or not, these accounts reveal something important. People viewed Osman as more than a warrior. They saw him as a ruler. And perhaps that was the key difference. Many men knew how to fight. Far fewer knew how to build something lasting. Osman belonged to the second group. He was building more than an army. He was building loyalty, trust, and a sense of purpose. Meanwhile, conditions around him continued deteriorating. The Seljuk state became increasingly powerless. Mongol influence remained strong. Regional rulers competed against one another. The old order was slowly collapsing. For some, this period brought fear. For Osman, it brought opportunity. He realized that nobody was coming to protect the frontier. If his people wanted security, they would have to create it themselves. And so, step by step, he expanded his authority. His victories remained modest. His resources remained limited. But each success increased his confidence. And with every passing year, his dream grew larger. The young tribal leader was slowly transforming into something else. A statesman. A commander. A founder. Still, the road ahead would not be easy. Power attracts enemies. And Osman's growing influence worried many people. Some neighboring rulers feared his ambitions. Some Byzantine commanders wanted him eliminated. Others believed he represented a serious threat to the balance of power in Anatolia. The frontier was changing. And everyone could feel it. A new force was emerging. Its army was small. Its lands were limited. Its future remained uncertain. But its leader possessed determination unlike anything his rivals had seen. Osman believed that his people were destined for greatness. And perhaps for the first time. Others were beginning to believe it too. The son of Ertugrul had stepped out of his father's shadow. He was no longer merely the leader of a tribe. He was becoming the architect of a new state. A state that would one day stretch across continents. But before that dream could become reality, Osman would face his greatest challenges yet. Because the next battles would determine whether his movement would survive. Or disappear into the forgotten pages of history. The frontier was changing. Every year, Osman's influence grew stronger. Every victory brought him new allies. Every new alliance brought him more warriors. And every new warrior strengthened the foundations of what would soon become a new state. Yet Osman understood something important. Winning battles was not enough. Many leaders had won battles. Many kingdoms had conquered lands. But most of them eventually disappeared. Osman wanted something different. He wanted permanence. He wanted to build a state that would survive long after he was gone. At the end of the 13th century, Anatolia was in turmoil. The Seljuk Sultanate had become little more than a shadow of its former self. The Mongols still influenced the region. The Byzantine Empire was weakened and divided. Everywhere, rulers fought for power. And in this chaos, Osman continued moving forward. His warriors launched raids against Byzantine frontier positions. Small fortresses began falling under his control. Villages accepted his authority. Trade routes gradually opened to him. The territory under his leadership slowly expanded. To many people, these victories seemed insignificant. But Osman saw the bigger picture. Every captured fortress was another piece of the future state he dreamed of creating. Among his greatest strengths was patience. He did not rush. He did not seek glory through reckless wars. Instead, he advanced carefully. He chose his battles wisely. And when opportunities appeared, he acted decisively. His leadership attracted more people every year. Warriors arrived from distant regions. Scholars visited his lands. Families settled in territories under his control. People were drawn by something they believed was rare. Stability. Justice. Hope. On the frontier, these things were priceless. Osman treated newly conquered communities differently than many rulers of his time. He understood that fear alone could never build a lasting state. A ruler could conquer cities with armies. But loyalty had to be earned. He protected trade. He encouraged settlement. He offered security to communities living under his authority. As a result, his lands became increasingly prosperous. Even some people who had once considered him an enemy began accepting his rule. The young frontier leader was no longer simply surviving. He was governing. And this changed everything. Because leadership in war and leadership in peace are very different challenges. Osman proved capable of both. Stories about him spread throughout Anatolia. Some called him a brave warrior. Others called him a wise ruler. Many began seeing him as the leader of a rising power. And perhaps they were right. Then came one of the defining moments of his career. The capture of important Byzantine strongholds near his territories. Each victory weakened Byzantine influence. Each victory strengthened Osman's position. And each victory brought him closer to independence. For years, frontier leaders had technically remained under Seljuk authority. But the Seljuk state had become increasingly powerless. Its ability to control the frontier had almost disappeared. The old political order was collapsing. Osman recognized this reality. He realized that history was opening a door. A door that would not remain open forever. And he decided to walk through it. Around the year 1299, Osman took the step that would define his legacy forever. He declared his independence. This was more than a political decision. It was the birth of a new state. A small state. A fragile state. A state with uncertain prospects. But it was a state nonetheless. And history would remember it by the name of its founder. The Ottoman State. At that moment, nobody could have imagined what this new state would eventually become. No one could have predicted that future Ottoman armies would one day enter Constantinople. No one could have imagined Ottoman rule stretching across Southeast Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. No one could have foreseen 6 centuries of history. Because in 1299, the Ottoman state was still tiny. Its enemies were powerful. Its resources remained limited. Its future was anything but certain. Yet every empire begins somewhere. And this empire began with a frontier tribe and a man who refused to accept the limits of his circumstances. Osman continued strengthening his state. He organized his territories. He appointed trusted commanders. He developed systems of administration. He encouraged settlement and economic activity. Little by little, the foundations of a functioning state emerged. But the years of warfare had taken their toll. Osman was growing older. The energetic young warrior who had once ridden endlessly across the frontier was now an aging leader. Yet his determination remained unchanged. He continued planning. Continued building. Continued dreaming. Because he understood something few founders understand. The greatest achievements often belong not to one generation, but to the generations that follow. His work was not only for himself. It was for his children. And for the countless generations that would come after him. As time passed, Osman increasingly entrusted military responsibilities to his son, Orhan. The young prince had inherited many of his father's qualities. He was intelligent, patient, and capable. Osman knew that leadership required preparation. This new state would belong to the next generation. And it needed capable hands. One of Osman's greatest ambitions remained unfinished. The great Byzantine city of Bursa stood before him. Its walls still resisted Ottoman expansion. Its strategic importance was immense. Capturing Bursa would transform the future of the state. But Osman would never personally see the dream fulfilled. As his health declined, he spent more time reflecting on the extraordinary journey of his life. He had begun as the son of a frontier chief. He had inherited uncertainty and danger. He possessed no palace. No inherited kingdom. No mighty army. Yet he had created something remarkable. He had founded a state. A state that would outlive him by centuries. Eventually, the end of his life approached. Osman Bey died around the year 1324. By then, his state remained relatively small. To outsiders, it may not have appeared extraordinary. But appearances can be deceiving. Because hidden within that small state was enormous potential. Osman's son, Orhan, would continue the work. Future sultans would expand the state. Generations of Ottoman rulers would transform it into one of history's greatest empires. But none of it would have existed without Osman. Without his patience. Without his leadership. Without his vision. History often remembers emperors who inherited vast kingdoms. But there is something uniquely remarkable about founders. People who begin with almost nothing. People who create opportunities where none seem to exist. People who build institutions that outlive them. Osman Bey was one of those rare individuals. His empire did not begin with gold. It did not begin with enormous armies. It did not begin with powerful cities. It began with belief. Belief in a future that others could not yet see. And perhaps that is why his story continues to inspire people centuries later. Because the founder of the Ottoman Empire reminds us of a timeless truth. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And tell us in the comments. Did Osman Bey's greatest achievement come from his military victories, or from his vision of building a lasting state? Until next time, this has been the History Vault, where the past comes alive.